Jess, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Watch Us Thrive podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just jump right into it. I always start off with an introduction in your own words for anyone who's meeting you for the first time. Let them know, who is Jess Patz?
I should say I'm a mom first. I have 4 children, which is still crazy because my youngest is 18 months, but I am a very proud mom of 4. I'm a domestic abuse survivor, loud and proud. I wear that badge of honor, and I am a professional motivational speaker.
That's why we connected. Shout out to the Facebook networking groups. I tell my listeners all the time, get in those groups because you will meet some incredible people with such empowering testimonies, such as yourself. And that's really why I really wanted us to connect, because we do share that sister bond of being domestic abuse survivors. That's going to be the main topic of this conversation. I do want to put a trigger warning out now for anyone who's listening. It can and it will get a little bit heavy. It can be triggering, but we need to have these types of conversations because, like we said before we started recording, it's happening so much more often than we even acknowledge. And being a survivor, you and I both feel like because we were able to come out of such a dark moment in our lives, it's our duty to be able to raise awareness and speak up for those who don't have the courage yet to tell their stories. So we want to create the conversation. We want to create the safe space for you guys to not feel so alone in this process. With that being said, I always have every single guest that comes on the show first go back to childhood. I would love to know, what was your dynamic growing up? Was domestic violence something that you witnessed growing up?
I love that I get to talk about this because it's such almost a complete flip from my childhood. My childhood was phenomenal. I was the only child. My parents were wonderful. My mom, bless her soul, she's passed away almost 16 years ago. But before we lost her, my parents were married very happily for 25 years. I went to a private school for 12 years. I grew up in a really small town. So like my 1st through 8th grade experience was all the same kids, maybe like 19 or 21 kids in my class for that entire time. I was really blessed in that way. Now, as I got older into high school, my dad and I definitely had our struggles. It was mainly me kind of acting out and not understanding my mom's illness at the time. She was born with a chromosomal disorder called Turner syndrome. And it just wasn't something that my parents talked about with me. I knew she had been sick. I had seen her be sick and in and out of the hospital and all these things, but I had no understanding of it. And she was my person. My mom was just one of the most incredible human beings on the planet, which I think is why God took her home way before I wanted her to leave. The world couldn't handle that much good. But seeing her be sick and the thought of losing her, I just rebelled tremendously. I pushed my dad away. After I graduated high school, I moved out. I graduated high school, turned 18 days later. And then I just decided that I knew everything and I didn't want to live with my parents. And I met my first husband really quickly after I graduated high school. So being the only child, I mean, it was not a rough life. I was very creative. I was a leader. I was super athletic. I was a gymnast, played basketball, had lots of friends. I was never the popular girl, but I didn't care. I did not care what people thought of me. My nickname was Jess Man because I was like stacked as a gymnast. I used to arm wrestle boys in religion class. There were no F's given. It was different. Really lucky to be able to kind of grow up that way and experience that. That's for sure.
And that's why I love always starting off with childhood, especially when it comes to survivors of domestic violence, because there's such a stigma with society that if that's what you saw growing up, then obviously you're going to repeat the cycle, right? And the same thing for me. My parents, they just celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. They're high school sweethearts. Of course, they argued, but I never saw violence in my home. I never saw or heard my dad call my mom a bitch or vice versa. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting to see and hear other people's stories that, like, we didn't come from these homes where there was just violence and toxicity around us. And yeah, we repeated the cycle. No, like my childhood was great. We went to Disney every year. We were never lacking. We definitely had a home filled with love. And then to later on down in my own life to find these types of toxic men, which is not something that I saw growing up. It was very interesting to see. So I appreciate you for sharing that, how different the dynamics are.
No, thank you. That's why I think it's important to share it, because I'm sure you've gotten the question too, or the phrase, oh, you don't look like someone who would have been in a domestic violence relationship, especially from people who maybe knew us when we were children and saw our wonderful, loving family. Then when you try and talk about it, they almost try and poke holes in it. Well, no, you were taught better. You should know better. What are you thinking? And it's that victim shaming that irks me so bad. Survivor or victim of domestic violence fits into no mold. It can happen to anybody from any background at any age or any sexuality.
Any race, doesn't matter how much you have in your bank account, like nothing. It affects so many, 1 in 3 women. The stats are wild. It's crazy. So, I mean, that's the perfect segue into you sharing your survivor story. Again, this can be triggering for some, but I would love for you to take us on the journey of how the relationship evolved. When was the final moment that you realized, I can't fucking take this anymore. I need to walk away for good, and share some little moments in between of the things that you experienced in that relationship.
It started really innocently. Looking back now, of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? Because I was raised in a very traditional setting in a Catholic school. And then when I met my now ex-husband, my first husband, he was totally opposite for me. His mom has been married multiple times, like 5+ times. His dad was around, but not really, never graduated high school. When I met him, he had just got out of prison for the first time, but I didn't know that.
Oh my God, same.
Seriously?
I swear. There were so many things about my exes. Like I knew he had a rough upbringing, but I didn't know the extent of it. And he's been in and out of the prison system as well. So it's just like, oh my God, why do we attract these type of men?
I asked myself that for a long time. Trust me.
I'm still trying to figure that out.
I think at the time it was because I was a lost soul. I had no idea where I was going. I isolated myself from my family. My mom had been terminally ill. In 2004, I was a senior in high school. She had been in a coma for a long time, over a month. We thought we were going to lose her. And then once, thankfully, she came out of that and was okay, I just still didn't know like where to go. And I moved out. And so I was just like an abusive, narcissistic person's dream come true, like served up to them on a silver platter. Love me, worship me, take care of me. Major daddy issues. And he was crashing in my friend's futon. It was nothing impressive. Like crazy baggy jeans, oversized t-shirts, flat brim hats. He's just like this little teeny tiny white guy who acted like he was so much tougher than he was. But the love bombing got me, man. You're so beautiful. I'm so sorry for what your family's going through. Oh my gosh. And he listened to me. It made me feel heard and was willing to spend all of this time with me and make me feel special in a world that I hadn't felt special in for a while. So we fell really hard, really fast. I don't even remember exactly when we started dating, but by the time I was 19, at my 19th birthday dinner, we were telling my parents I was pregnant. And I was thrilled. Like there was no freak out that I was so young or that he was this bad guy. I really thought we were defying the odds. Like, okay, I didn't go to college. My father with like a double master's degree would have loved for me too. But we're in love and we're having a baby and we're like breaking all the odds and proving people wrong. It's going to be glorious. And the first time he ever physically abused me, I was like 3 months pregnant with our oldest. If you have not been in it, people have a really hard time understanding, especially when you're pregnant, like what the hell's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you have just left and run away then? It just happened so fast. We were at the river with friends. Oh gosh, we lived in the middle of nowhere, like complete hillbilly town. And I was pregnant, so I knew I was going to be DD. Everyone else was completely tanked. I went to climb in the driver's seat of the car to drive us home, and he yanks my hair, pulls me out of the car, and I like fall down onto the gravel driveway. I just remember laying there. My ears were ringing. I wasn't like crazy injured, but I was like, did that really just happen? And he's screaming at me like, get up, calling me all sorts of names. And I wind up getting up and sitting in the backseat of the car while he drove us all home while he was drunk, and he's yelling at me half the way. And I know there was a moment when I was sitting there like, fuck this. This is not how I was raised. My parents taught me better. I'm getting out of this car and I'm calling my parents and I'm done. And of course, that's not what happened. We lived with one of his family members at the time. So when we got home, they could sense the tension and knew something had happened. And I remember that was the very first time I talked to anybody about what had been going on. Emotional abuse, physical abuse, any of it. And I was met with, well, sounds like you probably had too much to drink. Are you okay? Like, are you bleeding? Let me see your head. And it was just diminished to the point where I felt stupid. I made a big deal out of it. I'm pregnant. I'm hormonal. I'm over exaggerating. So I told nobody. And that's unfortunately the pattern that our relationship took for the next several years. The physical abuse got worse and worse because that's what happens when they do it once. Even if you freak out and you're like, screw you, you're never going to do this again. He never apologized to me. There was never these moments. He's not the apologizer of the abusers. It was the blaming. It was my fault. I provoked him. I should have known better. I did this or didn't do this. And you just start to really embody those thoughts and you believe that it's your fault to some regard. And then once you have kids together, and then once I got pregnant again, we're so intertwined and I was so young. By the time I was pregnant with our second child, my mom had since passed away. My dad was completely lost in his grief, of course, for the love of his life, his wife of 25 years. I was not going to burden him with my relationship drama. So I just really was convinced that if I was well behaved enough and loved him enough, was the best fiance, we were going to get married and it would change. And I, in my brain, had convinced myself once we got married and I was his wife, it would stop. He would just he's not going to want to abuse his wife. Unfortunately, that was super far from the truth. By the time we had our second child and we're getting married, the sexual abuse was a very regular thing. No part of our sexual relationship was consensual for the most part. There were moments where it was because I knew he was cheating on me. So I wanted to still feel beautiful enough and have him desire me, as warped as that is. But then there were also so many moments, even the night before my mom's viewing, he forced himself on me. You just lay there and take it because you're so exhausted and the harder you fight, the harder it's going to come across. So I was just kind of this unwilling participant in my life. I was going through the motions, pouring myself into this wedding. And the second we got married, it went from bad to a nightmare because he had me right where he wanted me. He knew I didn't really believe in divorce. It wasn't a part of my verbiage. Nobody around me was divorced. It just wasn't something I experienced. And he knew that. So he used it against me. And it was this is for better or for worse. What are you going to do, Jess? You're going to leave? You don't have a job? You have kids? You think you're going to take the kids and be able to support them? You'll never see them again. And that fear is really real because when they threaten to kick your ass, they kick your ass. So if he's threatening that I'm not going to see my kids, of course I'm going to believe him because that has played out to be reality. And it wasn't until we were in the middle of a physical altercation that just ran through our whole house. Both of our kids were still in diapers, but they were in between us. And he had me pinned on the steps and he was standing over top of me and punched me in the jaw with my son on my lap and then drug me up the steps by my hair. And they were crying after me. And I just realized, I don't know why it took something so horrific, but I realized it's not just me. If I don't love myself enough to get away from this man, I love them enough to make sure they never experience this. Because at some point, babies are so cute and no one wants to hurt them. But at some point, my very spirited daughter will become a very mouthy, strong teenage daughter and will push back. Or my son, when he's a man, will need to learn some kind of lesson. And I just couldn't live with myself knowing that I was going to lay back and allow that to happen. So I didn't leave right away, but I started putting things in motion. I left with almost no money, $60 to my name. And I just kind of figured it out along the way.
Wow. I want to just take that in for a minute because that is definitely a lot to hear. And I'm sure it was a lot for you to experience. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing because I know it's not easy. I'm so proud of you for reaching that point and Unfortunately, it did take something very horrific for you to experience. Same thing for me. Started off beautiful, rainbows and butterflies. I thought I finally found the one. And then this was all happening during the pandemic. So it progressed very, very quickly. The world shut down. Now we're stuck together. We don't fucking know each other. And it just progressed like super, super fast. And finally, the real person who he was showing up because we had nowhere to go. And the night that my life was almost taken from me and I physically escaped out of my apartment after he strangled me multiple times, put a knife to my neck, put a knife to my knee, tried to set me on fire, like so many horrific things I experienced that night. It took for me to physically escape from him to finally wake up because there were so many red flags before in between that I feel like I knew, but I didn't listen to it for whatever reason. And I believe in God. I believe in a higher power for whoever's listening, whatever you believe in. But I truly believe that God was trying to save me so many times. And it was going to take something very traumatic, shaking the fucking table for me to wake up and realize if you continue, you're not going to make it out alive. This is why I like having this conversation with other survivors because people who have not experienced this type of relationship, they don't understand the same way that we do. They look at it from the outside. It's like, oh my God, she was pregnant. Why the fuck would she stay? Or, oh, he put a knife to your neck. Why would you stay with him? But it wasn't always like that. He wasn't always such an evil person. There was someone that I actually fell in love with who made me laugh, who made me smile, who made me feel good, who loved on me, all of these things. And you really don't understand it until you're in it.
Yeah. And then you cling to that version of the person you fell in love with. Once this explosive moment happens, whatever kind of abuse it explodes in your face and it's so bad. And then the cycle repeats itself. And whether they're apologizing, blaming you, whatever, it calms down. And you think to yourself, okay, all right, we've made it over this hump. You see little glimpses of the person they pretended to be to get you into that position. And the whole like, why did you stay or why didn't you leave? I get that. Logically, I understand that thought process, but we need to start asking, why the hell did he feel like he could put a knife to your neck? What the fuck possessed this man to put his hands on his pregnant girlfriend? Those are the questions that we need to ask, because whether you understand why we stayed and what our thoughts were, it doesn't change the events that were happening. We were simply surviving and reacting to a situation that we had no control over.
Yes, and we didn't ask to be a part of.
Exactly. Until we flip the script and have people really understand how those abusive tendencies continue to be perpetuated and almost accepted, because people don't want to believe that it happens. I know, like the whole staying, or I chose to believe like I was crazy. I chose to believe that he was going to be better, because allowing myself to really understand the monster that he was too scary, because I felt so shameful. I felt then I am part of the problem. If I have stayed, if I have married him and I had kids with him, then nobody's going to give a crap. No one's going to want to help me or protect me because I chose this in some warped way. I chose to try and believe that he was a different version of himself, because accepting the reality, whether it was right in front of my face or not, that was too hard until it wasn't. You don't get it until you're in it.
Exactly, 100%. That's why I appreciate these conversations, because even though our stories are very different, there's so many similarities that I'm even thinking about my own relationship like, oh my God. And when you're in these types of relationships, you feel like you're the only one going through it, right?
Absolutely, even after.
So I want to know, how long were you guys together?
We were together just under 5 years. So not super long, but it was really young, impactful moments of my life. And then I left him. The abuse couldn't be proven between he and I. So we still had to co-parent. That was hands down the worst part, saying, okay, you don't have to be married to him anymore, but you somehow have to allow him to be part of the most important things in your life, your children.
That's got to be just like another layer of trauma on top of the shit that you already experienced while with him. Now you have to co-parent with this person that you know is a piece of shit person. Like, he has no regard to your kids because he abused you in front of his kids. So talk about like the journey after. And I know that eventually the legal system came in and he was sentenced to prison. So talk about that.
Yeah. So after we were separated, still co-parenting, I mean, I had a protection order at first because he had strangled me in front of them. And I went to work. So everyone saw like the handprints on my neck. It couldn't be ignored. He got a disorderly conduct. It was nothing. It's astonishing.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
As a former felon, already a felon, had been in prison, he strangles a woman who we were legally still married at the time, and he got a disorderly conduct. But he started dating somebody else almost immediately. And that also messed with my head because now we're co-parenting and he didn't see them for a while until their relationship started to get more serious. And then he had to behave like this, upstanding daddy of the year. And from the legal perspective, our courts just really believe that mom and dad have to be involved. And that is the ultimate goal. The first time he ever physically touched one of our children, my daughter was 4, and he hit her in the face. She had a black eye. Children's Services investigated. We were in the middle of a custody battle and divorce hearing, and they were just like, well, don't do it again. I learned very quickly that unless someone was beaten to a bloody pulp, they were not going to pay attention. My children would sit in the courtroom and be questioned by a judge or a magistrate. And because they couldn't put together a credible timeline at the age of like 6 years old, their stories weren't believed. So not only was it extremely hard as a woman, as a mother, to allow my children to be in that situation because I had no choice legally, my kids were put through years of trauma because our judicial system is broken. So it was almost 10 years after we had left and I was no longer with him or married to him. I knew things were not good with his girlfriend or wife at the time. They ended up getting married. We were not friendly because he pinned us against each other. I was always the crazy, bitter ex-wife who made up stories and turned his children against him. And of course, she was team him. So it wasn't until I got a call that something had happened. A police officer called me, said, have you talked to him? And he was supposed to actually get our children back that day. And he had texted me in the morning and asked if I could keep them a couple more days because he had to work and his wife was sick or something. And I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Well, he was on the run because he almost killed her the night before. And her story is her story. So I'm always like very careful to not share too much, but it's all public record. He was charged and convicted of domestic violence, kidnapping, felonious assault, and rape, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. It took literally someone almost dying. I don't know how she made it out of there alive. To this day, I mean, it's miraculous that she had the strength. She left with like her body beaten and bruised, got into the car. He kicks in her windshield and she drives herself to the hospital with her head hanging out of the window. And her enduring that saved us. All of a sudden, it was the sickest kind of vindication because now even she knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. All of these things were true. We were safe. She had achieved something that we were never able to do. The whole process took like a year for him to be charged. She actually got out on bail. He was charged with attempted murder, not convicted of it, which is bizarre because he put a belt around her neck and strangled her with a belt. I don't know what your intentions are by doing that, if not to potentially end someone's life. But he made bail and he bought a business while he was on bail for attempted murder charges. 1 week he's on the paper as, this man charged of rape and attempted murder of his wife. Flash forward like 7 months, proud business owner. So it was really weird because once he was arrested and then specifically once he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, I'm like, oh my God, we're like done. And really the work had just begun. I had so much healing to do personally. The journey with my children healing, I was so not prepared for. And he still is biologically their dad. So then it's the whole, do they talk to him? Do they see him? Then there's his family and they took me to court and all of these other battles that don't just disappear because he's in prison for 20 years. While we are so blessed and thankful that everybody is finally safe, he left a wave of damage in the hurricane that he kind of created in our lives. And then we have fought like hell to survive all of it.
Oh, Jesus, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I just appreciate you being so vulnerable and so authentic with your story because, like I said, this is a very heavy topic that a lot of people have experienced, but I just appreciate you painting the picture that this is real life. Like, this happens every single day. The judicial system is just a whole nother topic that we could spend hours on, and how fucked up it is and how it's so put against the victims and it's more lenient towards the perpetrators, which is fucking ridiculous. It's a shame that something so horrendous, like that woman almost losing her life, that's when they finally decided to wake up. Like, oh, it's always like when it's too late. Like when someone dies and you see it on the news, like, oh, another person succumbed to the abuse of their partner. Now let's talk about it. Now let's create change. But I'm sure there was a fucking paper trail for years like you had. And then when it's too late, that's when people want to really realize and wake the fuck up. And it's bullshit.
100%. It shouldn't take something like that for people to wake up, because you don't start dating someone and they start kicking the shit out of you right away, or else nobody would be in an abusive relationship. It's psychological warfare. It is a marathon. They know how to play this game of chess so much better than honest, good-hearted individuals. And then all of the other elements of abuse peek in. You better believe, since he's been arrested and sentenced, once I knew what happened to his second wife, I called her right away. The police literally told me, no, you shouldn't. And I'm like, F that noise. And I called her and I just said, whatever you need from me, I will do. And there wasn't really much I could do, but I wrote a letter to the judge for like his sentencing hearing to paint a picture. And I listed every magistrate, every judge, every guardian ad litem, every caseworker we had ever had that ignored a decade-long history of abuse to myself, to my children, that could have been prevented. And that was my plea. Listen, these are all of the other things he has done. Now he almost killed a woman. You know what's going to happen next? He's actually going to kill someone. And abusers only hurt people close to them. And guess who's close to them? My children. So help me God. If we do not exercise justice in a very severe way today, I'm not willing to accept that my kids are going to continue to be put in harm's way. And thankfully, 20 years for a crime of domestic violence is pretty unheard of, but that's heavy. A murderer sometimes don't even get a sentence that stiff. So the judge actually said in his sentencing, this is the worst crime of domestic violence I've ever seen come across my docket.
My ex got 4 years for what he did to me. He had a lot more charges because there was a gun charge as well, but for whatever reason, that was removed off the table because of what the police failed to do. I'm grateful that some sort of justice was able to come from my situation as opposed to him just getting like a slap on the wrist and then going out and doing it again. I'm just glad that some sort of vindication, like you said, was able to come from it. And I would love for you to share, since we touched on it a little bit, being a survivor, for someone who's listening and feels like they might be in this type of abusive relationship, but they're not really sure. What would you say are some warning signs or red flags that someone should look out for?
The first red flag is, honestly, if you feel like someone is not treating you properly, they are not. You have to trust your gut. You don't need to get approval from your family and friends, although specifically as a woman, I know that's just what we do. But if something doesn't feel okay, it probably isn't okay. If anybody ever physically puts their hands on you in a way that makes you feel unsafe, you have not done anything to deserve that. It will get worse. That's always my warning. These red flags become like red sirens if you don't listen to them. They just get bigger once the snowball starts rolling down the hill, and they maybe just grab your arm too hard one time, or they just kind of shove you, or if they start paying really close attention to your spending habits, where you're going. Hey babe, can I see your location? I just want to make sure you're safe. But if they're watching you too closely, if all of a sudden you're getting calls and texts, hey, why are you on Smith Street? You're not supposed to be on Smith Street. Who do you know over there? What are you doing? Those things are not part of a healthy relationship. See, that's how they will get you, because there are normal pieces of that dynamic, but they exacerbate it. You are an individual who deserves to be respected and loved. No matter what kind of relationship you are in, you are allowed to have your own independence and identity, and they will try to rob you of that. If you notice them not wanting to go to family gatherings, Oh, well, your mom's just not real nice. This friend, she's super judgy. I don't think you should hang out with anymore. And all of a sudden you're looking around and there's not a whole lot of people in your circle. That is an enormous red flag. They are isolating you. And it's really hard for the people on the outside who may see what's going on clear as day, that love you so much. Nobody knows what to say unless they've been in it themselves, because everyone believes what happens behind closed doors isn't my business. Every relationship and every marriage is different, and what they choose to accept is their own business. So you just have to trust your heart and trust your gut. And there is nothing wrong with advocating for yourself. You have to be able to set boundaries. You teach people how to treat you. And the more you wish it away and the more you make excuses for them, the worse it's going to get. Anyone that tells you something different is lying. It will continue to get worse, and it will get so bad to the point where it's harder and harder and harder to get out from underneath of it.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because I relate to so many things that you talked about. There's something that you said earlier that I related to so much. You felt like if I loved him more, or if I did more for him, then I could change him. And what I realize now, being on the other side, the growth that's happened in me, I just knew there was nothing that I was going to be able to do to change that person. The only person who can change is them. Same for me. I was the only person who was going to make me change and make me grow and learn from that. And focusing on the relationship that I had with myself was top priority for me. There was such a lack within me of confidence, of love, of trust, of all these things. And I was just seeking that from anyone who came into my space. When I finally realized that, like, no, you needed to have that for yourself. You had to set that tone to let people know, this is my standard. And if you fall below it, I'm not entertaining you anymore. And I'm so grateful now, looking back, for all the shit that I experienced. While I'm not glad that it happened, I wouldn't change it. It's turned me into the woman that I am now. And now I know I will never allow anyone to treat me less than what I know I deserve, because now I know who the fuck I am. Back then I didn't. And I'm sure you can relate to that too.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Everything you just said, I completely parrot. You have to allow yourself to be empowered enough to put you first. I had no idea who I was. That man could have told me that the sky was purple and the grass was orange. I've been like, Once you finally set those boundaries for yourself, the doors that will open and the happiness and the opportunities that come your way, lean into all of that. It's going to be scary. That's the other part I tell people. Like, it took me a long time. It took me 10 years and another pretty toxic, messed up relationship that I felt shame for, because I know better. I left my abusive husband. It wasn't physical or anything like that, but it was not healthy. And I was like, no, how could I be here again? But I had to do the work. I had to learn who the hell I was and what made me tick, what I actually wanted out of life outside of being a mom, and allow myself to explore that stuff. And then it was like, gloves off. You may shake me, life is still going to be hard, but I'm a firm believer that behind every strong person you see, there is a story that gave them no choice. There was no option to just roll over and play dead. I may not have always been the best version of myself. I made so many mistakes, going from like victim mentality to survivor and thriver. So many mistakes and bad choices. But I finally at some point chose to do better and chose to allow myself, you feel guilty being happy to some degree. And you're so used to the toxicity. It's hard to explain when people are very used to kind of the stableness, but it's like when you're on like maybe a first date with someone and the conversation's going great, and then all of a sudden it's silent and it's like awkward and you don't know if you should speak or say something. That's what healthiness feels like to someone who is surrounded by toxicity for significant parts of their life. It feels uncomfortable. You want to like crawl out of your skin and you're second guessing it. And do they love me? Is this person my friend? Can I do this? Am I worthless? And you have to have a complete mind shift. And that looks a little bit different for some people, whatever those tools are, but it is 100% possible.
Definitely not a journey that's going to happen overnight, right? Like, this is an ongoing healing experience experience that we're all going through being survivors of domestic violence. And I just love that now you've been able to turn something so negative and you're an advocate and you use your voice to take your power back with what you've gone through to help empower other survivors. So I want to know, why do you think it's so important for us to raise awareness around this? And why do you think it's so important for us to be a voice for the voiceless?
Because if we don't, who else will? We have a responsibility, in my opinion, as survivors. I know too many people who have not survived. Their lives have ended. Their worlds have maybe ended, even if they're still living. They still have to deal with their abuser in one way or another. Their voices will never be heard. And if we are not normalizing the conversation around abuse, it will continue to be this taboo topic that's only talked about behind closed doors in the shadow of society. And then no one will ever know what it looks like that help is out there, that hope does exist, and that there are resources out there. Every time I'm able to share, there's at least one person, whether it's a podcast, an in-person speaking thing, one person will reach out to me and share their story of survival, will say, I never looked at it this way, and it has touched them. And that is enough. That is why you keep sharing, because somebody out there needs to hear your story and you can change lives. It's the best comeback story ever. When something tried to break you, I mean, it broke me. It really broke me for a minute. Not only survived it, but I'm using it as a tool to help empower other people. It's the biggest comeback story for me. It's a really empowering feeling. So I like giving it to other people, but it's so self-serving. It reminds me that I really am strong. And even though I don't live in a McMansion, and drive this fancy ass car, it doesn't need to be on my resume. I have survived war and I'm still here to talk about it. And that is enough.
Yes. Oh, she is preaching. Yes. I love that so much. And that's really why I started this podcast. Originally, it was for me to share my story, my own life experiences. But as it's grown, I've had amazing people like you come on to share all different types of survivor stories of trauma and abuse and just a lot of heavy shit. And just to show this is only a small piece of your story. This is not all of who you are. And you can turn it around, but you have to make that happen. And how can you do that? By speaking up. There's such power in us using our voices to be able to tell our story. And same for me, when I started sharing the feedback from people that I knew in my immediate circle and then strangers online, like y'all, the people on the internet, your people are there. And there's so many people who are going to uplift you, who are going to understand you, who are going to advocate for you and just cheer you on. And you're going to be able to help them heal from whatever it is that they're going through just by hearing your story, your vindication, and just being able to turn your pain into your power. So kudos to you, girl. You are doing the damn thing.
Thank you. I mean, you try. It's trial and error. But I discovered after he got sentenced to prison for 20 years, I thought I was healed. I was good. I'm already a survivor. No. He was still silencing me. I was allowing the fear of his reaction, of his family's reaction, to silence me. So I encourage anyone, like sometimes you just can't, and I respect that. But if you are feeling a pull at your heart to share your story, whether it's domestic violence related or not, honestly, there's a reason for that. You're meant to share. I started sharing literally sitting on the floor of my bedroom on Facebook Live, ugly crying like Kim Kardashian. It made literally no sense, but I started and I ripped the Band-Aid off and it was impactful and it opened all of these doors for me. You have to just kind of take that back. Everybody deserves to have a voice. And I have just learned so much. And now I'm in a wonderful marriage with 4 beautifully, healthy, amazing kids. And I never would have thought this would be what my life was at 36, 100%. I just thought, well, I'm cool being alone. I'm a mom and I'm happy with myself and I love myself again. So that's enough.
I love that for you so much. And that's one of the questions that I want to ask you a little bit later. But I want to ask you first, for a listener who's listening right now and they just left this type of relationship. They're in the very beginning stages of the whole healing journey from an abusive relationship. What is some advice that you would share with them on how to heal from that abusive relationship?
You have to accept it may get worse before it gets better. Healing sounds real pretty, but it's brutal work because you're going to have to face stuff that you've buried deep down and you've ignored for a significant amount of time. You have to revisit it. I'm not saying we're getting lost in the grief and the depression and the shame or the trauma, but in order to move on from it, you have to stare it dead in the eyes and realize what it was or what it is, and then identify what it can do for you. Even the lowest moments in our life can serve us in a really positive way, but that's challenging. So it's going to get a little messy and it may get worse before it gets better. And if you have left an abusive relationship, first of all, you have done one of the hardest things ever. It takes people on average 7 times trying to leave, going back, trying to leave, going back. And you have made it out of that statistic. Do not let anybody around you convince you that you need to give it another try because you're married or they weren't always that bad or they've really changed or they're the father or they're the mother, whatever. No. You need to be very intentional on who you surround yourself with and let into your circle at that moment in your life. If other people around you are not understanding, they don't have to be mean about it. Maybe they just don't get it and they're trying to ask too many questions and you feel like they're judging you. It's okay to take a break from them. You need people around you who are serving your desire to have a safe future. And if you don't have those people, there are agencies across the country that are willing to help. There's a national domestic violence network. There are individual agencies in every state and every county that can help. Churches are a great place to start. Doesn't matter what you believe in, what denomination you are. There are really loving people willing to, even if nobody's going to be able to fix it. That's the other thing. Nobody can wave a wand and make all of that go away, but people can love you through it. And a lot of the times that means more because once you're on the other side of it and you walk through it, you feel like a badass because you did that. No matter who supported you and who's loved you through it, you did that on your own for yourself. Nobody can ever take that away from you ever again.
Ditto to everything that you said. And I really love that you started off with being realistic and letting people know it's not going to be comfortable. If you really take this healing journey seriously, personal development is fucking ugly. I've cried so many times. I've looked in the mirror and just broke down so many times and really dug into that really dark part of Leanne that I don't want anyone to see. But that is what needed healing. And that is what started the process for me to really take my growth journey seriously. So just know, y'all, if you really want to take this seriously, especially as a trauma survivor, it's uncomfortable, but it can happen. And understand that there are moments where you're going to be triggered. I was someone who was diagnosed, still is diagnosed with PTSD. And I do have my moments where triggers come up and I feel like, oh my God, I'm reverting back. But I know that I'm not. And I don't allow myself to stay in that feeling for too long. But I also don't run away from that feeling like I used to. Do you have triggers that still come up for you and how do you handle them? What advice would you tell a survivor to deal with those triggers that definitely come up?
Oh man, I 100% do. And that's why I try and paint a realistic picture because I've been divorced for over a decade. I'm in a wonderful situation now. So people can look at it and just be like, oh, it was simple, or she must have lucked out, or this, and she's fine. No, my husband, he's 6'6". He's like a giant, just little teddy bear of a man. He's the biggest heart of anyone you will ever meet. But even if he says my name in a specific way, it will trigger me. My first husband used to always say, Jessica Marie. And it was the tone in his voice, or he would mock me in a certain way to make me feel ignorant and super dumb. And if people give me a glimmer of that, and these are not physical things, that sets me off. And I have to automatically go, hoi, and check myself. I think you'll find tools that are different for everyone. I'm big on mantras. I always remind myself, I'm not that version of Jess anymore. I've come so far. This too shall pass. Everything is survivable. After what I've come through, this may have gotten me down. I may be feeling a certain way, but I snap myself back to reality. And sometimes I will count my blessings, quite literally. I have 4 wonderful children. Even before I met my husband, I love myself. I am talented. I'm intelligent. I am strong. And you have to pour that back into you. I mean, even to this day, he always used to come up and strangle me from behind because he wasn't very big. He's like 5'9", 5'10". I'm 5'8", so I'm not like this petite, delicate little flower of a girl. But if someone even comes up behind me to like hug me, it could be one of my kids, it will send me back to a not fun place sometimes. And it gets easier for me anyway as time passes, for sure. But it's just part of my journey. And I think you can't let it consume you. Once you are on that healing process, like when that trigger happens, you don't need to go all the way back to when that trigger initiated every single time. And I know that it's different. I'm not a therapist. I'm not like a psychologist in any way, but once you have healed from certain parts of it, completely reliving it, that doesn't really serve a purpose. So you identify why you're triggered, and sometimes that's enough. And you just continue to work through maybe that not triggering you. It might trigger you for the rest of your life. That's okay. Don't let it define you, because all it does is remind you of everything you have overcome. The mental aspect of it, the mind shift and that self-development piece for me has really, really been huge, because the mind is the most powerful tool we have. It can either work for us or against us. We have to train it wisely.
Absolutely. I say that all the time. Like, my physical wounds, they eventually healed, but that mental and emotional wound, that's the one that I know it's going to be probably for the rest of my life. And that's the one that I really need to work on the most. So just know, for anyone who's listening, like, slow and steady, and accept the bumps in the road that will come up, but you're able to pivot and change the direction of your healing journey. They say it's not linear. It's very up and down. There's ebbs and flows, and it's a real thing. But as long as you're continuing to work on yourself in the process, you're going to be fine. And there's people like us out here that we're resources too. I'm definitely going to leave resources in the show notes as far as like the national hotline and things. But I think also the power of community can be so healing for so many people who have gone through this type of trauma. So just know, reaching out and asking for help and saying, I'm not okay, that is okay too.
Oh, and that's a huge step. I think healing from trauma is like grief. I mean, grief never leaves you. It just transforms. It rides the waves of life with you. And healing is the same way. It's unrealistic to expect those very significant things in your life to just dissipate completely and never affect you again. There may be some times where something that triggered you for years doesn't, and then all of a sudden 3 years later, it triggers you again. That's just part of it. I went through postpartum depression really aggressively with my fourth child. I was weaker mentally, and things were chaotic, and I wasn't understanding my body again. And it brought up a lot of stuff. I was having night terrors, and it's a season though that I have to work my way out of. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen forever. So you just really be patient with yourself and give yourself the grace to figure it out. What worked yesterday may not work today. And that's okay, because something else will.
I love that you said that it's just a season. It doesn't need to be like the entire experience for you. All right. So now let's talk about what have been some resources or healing modalities that you've used on your own journey that you would be willing to share with my audience that have helped you and you think they would be able to benefit from that as well.
Talking, honestly, is very therapeutic. Whether you like it's actual traditional talk therapy, I believe in many kinds of therapy. Someone willing to listen that is kind of unbiased, whether it's a therapist, someone at church, a new friend, a support group, someone that just sometimes you just need to talk. You don't need answers. I don't need someone to go back and fix my first marriage and take it away and make it all better. I just have to like literally get that stuff out of my system. And even if you don't have someone, one thing that I started doing, which may sound super cheesy, was vlogging. Now I use it for like work stuff kind of professionally. But at the time, I literally just needed to emotionally vomit this stuff like out of my soul. So I would hold my phone up and talk to myself. Sometimes I'd be crying. I'd be angry. I'm like a out loud processor. So I had to get it out of my body in any way, shape, or form. And I love podcasts. I feel I'm going to like date myself, but I really feel like when I left, podcasts were not a huge thing. Use the internet for the magical, beautiful place it can be. I know that it's like taboo and it can be like judgy and harsh, but there are incredible groups out there that can be really beneficial to you. I think linking arms with someone who has walked that walk, that's honestly when I first started sharing and I created my organization, I Choose Hope. I thought like, what did I need back then? And it was like me 10 years down the road, someone who has kind of been on that journey, whether you're giving advice or not, you just have like almost a running buddy that in life that understands it in a unique way. Self-development was huge. I'm not a reader. I'm a listener. So I do like audible books. If I have a book, I'm like highlighting and outlining. It just is different based on the book, but remind yourself how awesome you are. And that takes self-development, that takes growth. So I love podcasts or books, and then you have to just talk about it. Whether you're alone in your bathroom looking in the mirror or you have someone that you can confide in, that's a huge part of healing and really taking your power back is looking in the mirror and saying, I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor.
Oof.
And you believe it over and over and over again, because that's a bridge. Like I remember I was in Brownies and we crossed the bridge to Girl Scouts. And
Me
then,
too. I was a Girl Scout too.
Cross the bridge from victim to survivor. And then there's thriver. Once you have survived something and now you're going to use that story of survival to make the world a more beautiful, better place, then you're thriver. But speak it into existence before you fully believe it.
I love that so much. I mean, that's really why I started my podcast. I needed an outlet as well. I love journaling, but to sit down and actually write shit out, like it takes too long for me. I'm not a patient person. And I feel like I'm better at speaking out my thoughts as opposed to writing them out. And it was so therapeutic for me, especially in the beginning of my whole healing personal development journey, just to get the thoughts out, like you said. I love talk therapy, and that's not the only thing that can be used as a healing tool or resource. But for me, working with a therapist was so beneficial, and working with a life coach as well. There's so many resources, and I think we need to utilize it and not have this mentality that we need to do it alone, and not have this mentality that if I do ask for help, I'm weak. I don't believe that at all. I think your vulnerability is your superpower.
Yes. Oh, I probably have that written on a post-it on my wall. Actually. 100%.
Yeah.
And be willing to get creative with it. Like just because I think the world tells you if you feel a little broken or helpless, then talk therapy is what you need to do. Maybe not. Maybe medication is something for you to experiment with. Figure out literally what works for you. It's like when you go to a doctor and you feel like you need to get a second opinion, you can get a second opinion on how to best heal and move your life forward. Because what works for me, what I have found success in, may not be what works for you. Like journaling is huge. Journal prompts are major, but I'm the same way. I'm more of an audible person. So that's why I did it with a video, but it was the same thing. It's like a digital diary that I was creating. And it's kind of cool to like go back and look at really low moments and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not there right now. Look at what it reminds yourself how far you've come.
Absolutely. That's why I love the whole documentation process. Like I listen back to old episodes. I'm like, damn, I have grown so much from when I recorded that. And I just love to see it. It fills me up. There's so many things out there for y'all that you can do, and just do research. I'm super excited. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to do my very first Reiki healing session. I'm so excited about that.
Oh,
yes. So excited. I finally found someone. Yeah, I found someone. She's a woman of color. She's young. She's been doing it for a while, and I met her previously. She did like a mini session at an event that I was at, and a lot of emotion came up for me in like 10 minutes. So I was like, oh, I'm going to book with her. I'm going to do a solo session because I want to do more body healing as opposed to just focusing on the brain and the mind. Like I want to be able to move through these feelings in different ways. So I'm really, really excited for that.
I love that you brought that up. I just spoke at an event last week. Actually, it was a fitness event, but I was reminding everyone like, and I've experienced this personally. I have some autoimmune issues now and that I've got to work through, but trauma, it doesn't just live like in our brain and in our heart. It is stored inside of our body.
Absolutely.
And we have to find a way to work through that. That's why the healing, the sooner you start that, the better. But be willing to understand it's not just like a psychological thing. It can manifest itself and very major physical attributes if you don't accept it and move through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, mind, body, it's so connected. Okay, so now I want to talk about you found love after experiencing abuse, and I would love for you to give some advice in regards to me, right? So I'm 2 years out. I'm
Okay.
100% celibate, no dating. I still have this fear of getting back out onto the dating scene because what if it happens again? That's a part of the thought process that I have. So I would love for you to just give some hope for someone like me who wants to find love, that healthy love, but is a survivor of domestic violence. What would be some advice you would share?
Oh, I love this topic because I can finally speak on it from like an actual educated perspective, kind of.
Yeah.
I am remarried. My husband and I have now been married since August of 2022.
Congratulations.
We've been together almost 3 years. Thank you. And I mean, if I would have written down like on paper, which I actually kind of encourage people to do, write your negotiables and non-negotiables, put it out into the universe, it would have been Kevin. My husband's name is Kevin. I think you really need to take the journey, which you're doing, with yourself. I had to figure out who I was and then really love the person that I was. Release myself of the shame and guilt and responsibility that I carried around for, I'm not kidding, 10 years that I had put myself through this, put my children through this. I should have done this differently. I should have done that differently. It could have ended sooner. What if I would have done this and then his second wife wouldn't have had to go through this? All of these things I had to let go and let myself off the hook. I'm such a hopeless romantic, and I knew I wanted to be in love again and like grow old with someone, but I also really wanted a healthy relationship. But I had to get to a point where I almost didn't care if I ever found it again. I know they say like you find it when you're not looking. Like I was looking, I was on a dating app. We met on a dating app. I was dating. I was like loving the free meals and cocktails and just feeling myself again. I needed to feel attractive. I needed to feel desirable, but I needed to feel those things, but they weren't all of me. If someone found me desirable or undesirable, it didn't make or break me. It was fine because I fucking loved myself. I loved what I was doing for work. At that point, when I met him, was a speaker and had started my organization, I Choose Hope, and was in this really good groove. People around me picked up on it. And it just felt really amazing to be in a place where, yes, I wanted to be married. Yes, I knew I wanted love. But before, I felt like I kind of rushed shit. I had a relationship in between my first husband and my second husband, my now husband. Never married, never engaged, but I call him Mr. Good on paper because literally on paper, I was like, oh, my dad's going to be impressed. Everyone's going to be like, look at what she came from. He's so impressive. This is awesome. But internally, emotionally, totally wrong fit, not good. And it was bad for a little bit of time because I was still trying to fit myself into this version that I thought I needed to be. So once you let go of those stigmas and let yourself off the hook of this guilt from whatever you've clung to in your past, whatever situation you have, and just identify where you want to go. Stop focusing so much on the great person you want to attract, because once you're the best version of yourself, you will attract that back. Whether it's opposite attract or not, I don't care. What is meant to complement you in life and your soul and your heart will come your way. I kissed a lot of frogs before I met my husband, but I also had to be a little bit more, it's like a twofold. Your boundaries are specific. When you sense a red flag again, you have to ask yourself, one, am I triggered? And that's why I'm feeling this way. And then two, if the answer is no, I'm not triggered. The second is trust your gut that something is off. It's not good. And that's okay. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. You're going to go about your business and be happy. So make sure you have very specific boundaries and you're teaching people how to treat you. But then secondly, what I wanted when I was maybe like 25 and what I thought was right for me was so vain and silly and like not what matters long term. You have to remind yourself you have literally survived war. You have survived things that other people might not be able to make it through. And anyone would be lucky as hell to have you in their life. If they don't see your worth and your badassness and everything that you've gone through, they don't deserve your energy. I mean, I think from our first date, my husband and I just each knew because we went deep which I'm like, I live in TMI. But it was interesting on a first date. They're like, what do you do for a living? And part of what I do is speaking. And, oh, how'd you get into speaking? My first husband was not a good man. I had to force myself to start sharing the honest versions of my past and not curling up internally and feeling so shameful of them because it's part of my life. Yeah. My ex-husband is never going away. We share biologically 2 children. As much as I hate it, and as much as I might still on some level worry what people may think, holding it in gives him back that power. So you just be authentic. That is the biggest piece of advice. Be exactly who you are. I'm super weird. I do headstands at public events. I say soda and sneakers and sofa. I'm super loud. I talk about my armpits sweating when I get nervous on pot. Like, I don't care. I just love me. And you're not going to be loved by everyone, but you'll be loved by the right people. And that's really who you want around anyway.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to play that back every single time I have like a first date or I'm feeling any kind of way. That was just so perfectly said. You give me so much hope that I know my person is out there, but right now I'm just still focusing on healing this. And then eventually I'm going to find the right person. The right person is going to be attracted to my energy. So thank you for sharing that. I love that so much.
You're welcome.
All right. So now I want to know all of the shit that you've gone through being a survivor. What would you say you've learned about yourself through those experiences?
I have learned that I'm okay just the way I am. I don't have to change myself to fit into somebody else's molds. I am strong and I'm out there for some people, but that's okay. I have just learned to accept myself, whether I'm upset that I made a mistake in life, it doesn't define me because I'm still awesome and I'm not perfect. I am perfectly imperfect and I give myself the grace to continue to make mistakes and grow from them and learn from them. So now I welcome kind of the bumps, even though sometimes like I still break down and I cry and I freak out to my husband and I lose my crap. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to grow anymore if I don't experience more hardship. It's part of my story and it's a blessing to be able to have a story worth sharing, which we all do.
I just want to give you the biggest hug because you are such an inspiration to be able to relate to a lot that you've said. You're giving so much hope to not only me, but anyone who's listening or watching this episode. So I just want to say thank you for being you because you are incredible and you are changing lives with your story.
Oh, that just gives me all the feels. That's all I've ever wanted. I feel like whatever direction life takes you in, I don't know, if your immediate goal is success and maybe fame or this, you're just doing the wrong thing. Success should be a byproduct of what your purpose is. And I want to be able to connect with people like you. I mean, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and creating this safe space for people like me and other domestic violence survivors to share and continue to have these conversations. They're not fun. Like I can stand here today and talk about kind of, I don't know, the pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. But my life still has tremendous ups and downs. And if you would have talked to me 5 years ago, there wouldn't have been that moment. But I still was a survivor and I'm still very proud of what I have worked through. So your story isn't over. This chapter may be over and you can finish that chapter, but be very willing to see where the next chapter takes you because it might be really unexpected and probably way better than you pictured that it was going to be.
That just gave me full body chills. Absolutely. I receive all of that and I throw it back to you tenfold because this is just the beginning of your journey and I'm so excited to witness it. So I want to stay on this good vibe feeling. You're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast. So tell me your definition of thriving.
I love this word, by the way, is when you literally use the shit that tried to destroy you and you turn it into something magical to make a difference. Surviving is tremendous. We are all survivors of something, whether you have personally been affected by domestic abuse or not. We have all survived life. But what do? That's a big badge. That's a huge, awesome honor of a medal to wear around your neck. Are you just going to let it sit there? No, you got to do something important with it because your story of survival is going to help other people realize they too can survive. Yeah. And that's what makes you thrive when you don't allow those moments to continue to silence you and break you and have that power over you.
That is one of the best definitions that I've gotten. I ask every guest this question, and just to be able, like you said, just turn it around and not have it just be this negative experience. Yes, it was, but you're able to turn it into something so beautiful and to help people in the process. That is the whole purpose of this brand, this podcast, is everything. Watch us thrive. It's named that for a reason, because we all have a story to tell. We can all turn our pain into power.
I just love what you've created here.
Thank
It's
you.
so aligned with what I'm trying to do. And it's contagious. Just like bad energy is contagious, so is good energy.
Yes.
But let this catch fire and ignite with people around you more. Have those hard conversations with your friends. When you listen to it and you feel inspired, go talk to people about it.
Yeah.
Let that catch like wildfire in the world around you, because it's so beautiful to see. I love nothing more than when people reach out and say, hey, I saw this and I talked to this person, and then you connect and all of a sudden you have this amazing world of thrivers around you. And
absolutely.
like the world, what's it going to throw at you now?
Yeah.
You have already thrived through so much. You've got this. It's going to be tough, but it'll be over and then it'll be beautiful again, and it's fine.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I love that so much. Shout out to Facebook, okay, for connecting us. This is a beautiful, beautiful conversation that we're having. Whatever age pops up for you, being the woman that you are today, what is one piece of advice you would tell your younger self?
I would have to tell my I was 21 when I got married, would have to tell her, no amount of love can change someone who's abusive. You can't change another human being. It's just like an alcoholic. If you want them to get sober, they have to choose to be sober for themselves. An abuser has to acknowledge that their abusive behavior is a problem and then work really hard to choose to do better and not want to do that anymore. So I would tell her, just stop wasting your energy. No matter how hard you try and how good and perfect you are, it's going to continue to be the same.
I couldn't relate more. I would honestly say that to Leanne from 2021. No amount of love or money or whatever it is that you're willing to give to this person and lose yourself in the process, it's not worth it. It's not. Like, you have to put yourself first.
Have to. And that's even in a healthy relationship now. I still find myself, we talk about triggers. There are triggers I see in me where my very healthy relationship, my marriage, and my husband and I will be having a disagreement. And I catch myself like reverting back to the old Jess, where I'm like fight or flight and I have to win this battle and it's me against you. Yeah. And I check myself and I'm like, oh, no. We don't do that anymore. It's just a process. Yes. And you have to give yourself time, but it's never worth losing who you are or the people around you. Ever. No healthy relationship. I don't care if you're with a man, a woman, no healthy relationship will require you to completely give up your own identity in order for it to exist.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself. I now know that I want to be whole on my own. And then whoever comes into my life from this point forward, like, you're just a bonus, but I'm good with or without you. It's not like, oh, you're my other half. No. That's not the mentality that we're having anymore. Like, Leanne is solid on her own. And yes, it would be beautiful to have someone to share that with. But if not, that's okay too.
I love that. Yeah. They should just compliment all the wonderful things about you, not take it away. They don't have to add to it, because you're still going to be you no matter who you're with. Yeah. My marriage is like a safe place for me to now be who I am. I don't have to like dim my light, quiet my voice, worry about embarrassing him or talking about stuff from the past that he's going to. No, he is like this wonderfully fertilized, healthy soil that I can now be planted in and bloom how I was always intended to. I don't have to worry about all this other stuff.
I love that for you so much. That makes me like, that just warms my soul, because I know that's out there for anyone, whether, you know, you're single or not. Like, you will be able to thrive on your own and just have these outside relationships just be a little bonus. So, oh my God, I love that for you so much. All right. So now this could be a heavy question, but you know, we have uncomfortable conversations on this podcast, so I'm going to ask it. Being the woman that you are today, what is one thing you would tell your abuser?
I would thank him, which may make no sense, but I want to thank him for trying to ruin my life, and you didn't. I want to thank him for showing me exactly how strong and capable I am. So the sassy me wants to tell him to F off and like, you tried it, but no, thank you. Because now I am an amazing human being, and we created two equally amazing human beings that I now get to watch flourish in a life that doesn't involve you. So thank you for being you and removing yourself from the equation.
And a big fuck you to you, okay? I love that so much, and that definitely comes with the journey, right? Because if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I would say, I fucking hate you. I hope you rot in hell. And while I still do feel that way, I also have this thankfulness. Thank you for showing me what I will no longer ever fucking accept in my life ever again. Thank you for allowing me to realize how fucked up I was and how much work I really needed to do, because now I know what it means to truly fall in love with myself. So thank you for that,
Yes. And you're right. I mean, that changes.
Yes.
There are moments, several years ago, I would have went through tit for tat, and all the moments that he made me feel like a liar and he told everyone I was crazy, and I would have brought all of that in his face. But first of all, arguing with a narcissistic abuser, like you're
There's
never
no
winning.
point. Nope. Never.
There's no winning. You are going to drive yourself crazy. I've spoken to my ex-husband exactly 2 times in the almost 6 years he's been in prison. Neither time produced any kind of like purposeful conversation at all. It's not worth my energy. And so now, it's that mind shift, and it's a conscious effort every day.
Yeah.
I could hate him forever. I have every freaking right to hate him until the day that I die. Not just for what you did to me, what you did to our children, what you did to this other woman and her children and my father and the people around us. I have every right to, but that is so heavy. That hatred and that anger, it weighs on you.
Yep.
So now I choose to be thankful, because it's unexpected and it's a much lighter, beautiful emotion to be able to carry around. I would not be who I was right now if I had not been through all of that stuff. There's no way.
She's preaching, y'all. I love this conversation so much, and I'm sad we're almost at the end, but I have one final question for you before you can plug in how we can work with you and follow you online. Someone needs to sit down and write about Jess. What do you want them to say about you?
I want them to say that I cared more about what I could give to the world than what it could give to me, and that I tried to use my pain to create a beautiful place for people to exist and feel less hopeless in the future. I want to have a legacy of hope, honestly. That's my dream.
You're not trying, you're doing, okay? So I want to give you your flowers. I want to thank you so much for coming on and having this beautifully inspiring conversation. I know people are going to want to know more about you, follow you. You said you have a foundation, plug that in as well, but let us know where you are online, how we can work with you, your offerings, all of that.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share anything. And yes, I want it, like if you are listening to this podcast now or watching us, please contact me. I want to hear from you, and I want to know how you found me and what your takeaways from this were. I am on all social media platforms as Jess Patz, JessPatz. I think on Instagram, there's an underscore in front of it. Same with LinkedIn. But I'm on all the things. I'm super active over there. I love being able to connect with people in real life. You will see me with no makeup on and a bathrobe with my gray hairs popping out in the morning, because that's just how we do things. And I do run an organization called I Choose Hope. And we do have a Facebook page. We kind of run, in the secrets of social media, but we help people in real time with emergency safety concerns. Let's say a shelter is not open or maybe not the best fit for them, because shelters are not meant for everyone. And there's not any other resources. We have helped move people across the country. We have put them in hotels, furnished homes, given gas cards, food. There is a lot of assistance out there, but there's all of this red tape and a lot of hoops and waiting lists sometimes to get the assistance that people drastically need. It's not always these massive sweeping changes. Sometimes it's a couple $100s to get over this hump to freedom. And that's really what we have had an awesome opportunity to be able to create with the I Choose Hope organization because of social media. That's why I love it. It is not a dark, scary place for me.
I love that so much. Definitely going to leave all of your info in the show notes. Jess, I just want to say once again, thank you so much. Thank you to Facebook for connecting us, because you have been able to turn something so dark and heavy into this beautiful place where you're giving hope to other survivors. I'm so grateful that we connected. I cannot wait to continue watching your journey. And I'm just so thankful.
Oh my gosh, I need to talk to you every day.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me on and making me feel way cooler than I am. I appreciate you.
Thank you.